Hello, this is Conscious TV. My name is Iain McNay. This is another program in our series on non-duality, and our guest today is Richard Sylvester. Hi, Richard.
Hello.
And so Richard has 2 books out with the Non-Duality Press talking about non-duality, and we're just going to talk to Richard a little bit about his life and where he is and how he sees things. So maybe we start, Richard, we were just talking earlier, and I asked you, when did you kind of start searching, if you like? And you were saying about 30 years ago.
35 years.
And I wonder what triggered that. Why did you... Most people don't really make a conscious search in life. What triggered it in you?
Well, I suppose I feel that nearly all of us are searching in some ways, but not necessarily in a, let's say, a spiritual or philosophical way. People are searching to make their minds, their lives work in some way or other. But I think in my case, as I think with quite a lot of other people, the reason it probably started to take a specifically spiritual direction, if you like, was because of a certain amount of unhappiness, discontent, feeling that whatever life was offering on the ordinary level, let's say, wasn't really cutting it. So I think, as with a lot of people probably, if I gave a single word answer to that question, it would be discontent.
So life wasn't giving you enough somehow?
Life was giving me a lot, and it wasn't enough.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
The usual things, relationship, job, certain amount of economic comfort, home, all of these things, and yet there was still a pretty profound feeling of discontent. And so, like a lot of people, I began to sort of gradually look. I suppose we're talking about the late 60s or 70s, so I suppose it was natural to start looking maybe towards the East and towards meditative practices and things like that at the time. They seemed to offer out some hope for the kind of satisfaction that ordinary life didn't seem to be providing.
And what was your starting point in terms of technique or practices that you did?
Well, after a certain amount of dabbling around with books on Buddhism and some very failed attempts to teach myself to meditate, I took myself off, like many other people at the time, I took myself off to transcendental meditation.
I did that as well.
Yeah. And I loved that, and that only lasted for 2 years, but that really got me started. I mean, I absolutely, I thought it was a fantastic thing to do at the time.
You had the mantra that you repeated
Absolutely.
silently in 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that kind of calmed you down, did you feel?
It had a pretty instantaneous and profound effect. Pretty much like they say, it was both very calming, very relaxing, but also on another level, it stirred things up a lot, which I think it's probably designed to do. It kind of brings to the surface that which is hidden within, and it was probably my first, I wouldn't have described it in those terms at the time, but it was probably my first meeting with what later on I would describe as my own shadow, my first conscious meeting with my own shadow, I would say.
Yeah, when I did TM, I found it a little bit the same. It stirred things up, and I couldn't find within the TM movement a way of addressing those, so I moved on to something else.
It sounds quite similar with me.
So what did you move on to?
Well, I moved on to, I'm going to call it a guru cult. I moved on to a guru cult for the next 3 years, which again was fantastic. It was great fun, very powerful techniques, lots of things happening, lots of entertainment, and also lots of feeling that, now I'm really getting somewhere. I'm on a path now which seems to be working. But going back to what you just said, there was also this feeling of all sorts of things are being stirred up which aren't really being dealt with, and which it became more and more obvious weren't going to be dealt with in that way. And I think that's when I started getting interested in, let's call it the Western psychotherapeutic path.
Right, yeah.
Which again, at that time, historically, a lot of people were doing the same thing. So a lot of people who'd been involved in, let's say, the Eastern transpersonal movements were also getting involved with the Western psychotherapy movements, particularly the humanistic side, because that seemed to go very well somehow with the lights and colour of the guru paths.
And you were based in London at the time, were you?
I was based in London at
Yeah.
the time, so there was ample opportunity to go off and spend enormous amounts of money having great fun on all sorts of different high-intensity courses, yeah.
Was this around the time of Community and Kaleidoscope?
Well, it was around the time of EST,
Yeah.
for example,
Yeah.
an organisation which I became very connected with for a short time was called Self-Transformations, which sort of burnt very brightly for a very brief period of time.
Right.
At that time. I'm just trying to remember, I suppose that must have been in the late 70s, very early 80s.
Right.
And of course there were lots and lots of other groups around, springing up in California, travelling across the Atlantic to us, springing up in London.
It was exciting
great
time,
fun.
because it was all so new,
absolutely.
wasn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. And it really did seem to be providing that which ordinary life, I'll call it that again, hadn't been providing. It seemed to be fulfilling that need to feel that we were getting somewhere other than simply accumulating wealth, family, house.
I find a different dimension of looking at things, and it questioned your values, but gave you somewhere ideas of where to look.
Absolutely, and of course the other element in that, which I'm forgetting to throw in, of course, also, which had an enormous effect on many of us, was of course the meeting with hallucinogenic drugs as well. I mean, that was also. Okay. So I mean, there were three ways in which suddenly there was this sort of huge expansion of what life seemed to be about and what consciousness seemed to consist of. There was the meditative paths, there was the psychotherapy, and there was a good kick in the head from a few doses of LSD as well for many people at that time, many people.
So did you at that point see yourself on a quest for enlightenment as such, or whatever you felt was enlightenment?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Without having with there being no possibility whatsoever of my knowing what that was, nevertheless constructing all sorts of idealised stories about it, and absolutely feeling that was somehow, somewhere, the goal, the mysterious end of this mysterious path.
Well, the carrots were being dangled, weren't they?
Absolutely.
And you felt that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And did you feel close at some point, or did you feel, this is I'm starting to get there, or did you feel it was like a game you enjoyed playing?
It was certainly a game that I enjoyed playing, and I think, again, like many people, like many other people, there were, I would call them now extraordinary experiences. There were extraordinary experiences which, because of the stories about personal enlightenment, because of the things I'd read, because of the people I'd listened to, seemed to be like signposts on the path. As as the sort of one of the traditional metaphors has it, they seem to be like that. At the time, it was impossible for me not to see them in that way.